On August 18, 2025, in the small community of Madbury, New Hampshire, law enforcement officers discovered the bodies of 4 people inside a private home whose address was not disclosed in official releases. Officers arrived at the scene around 6 p.m. after a call to the emergency service reporting multiple deaths inside the residence. When investigators entered the home, they found the bodies of 34-year-old Emily Long, her husband, 48-year-old Ryan Long, and their 2 sons, 8-year-old Parker and 6-year-old Ryan Jr. All 4 were already gone. According to early findings, each had sustained fatal gunshot wounds. Inside the residence, officers also found the couple's 3rd son, a 3-year-old, who was thankfully alive and physically unharmed. He had spent a significant amount of time alone in the home near the bodies, as officials later confirmed, likely between 12 and 15 hours. His condition at the moment he was found was stable, though he had been isolated for nearly an entire day. The bodies were located in different parts of the house. Emily Long was found with a single gunshot wound, and a firearm was discovered next to her. The layout of the scene and the position of the weapon allowed investigators to form an early working theory within the first few hours. Emily had taken the lives of her family members before engaging in fatal self-harm. It's worth noting how precise the wording of the official statements was. The description of the injuries avoided emotional tone, yet the sequence of events suggested a clear pattern. This did not appear to be an impulsive outburst, but rather a deliberate act carried out according to a predetermined plan. Hey everyone! Before we get into today's case, I want to ask you to hit that subscribe button, tap the thumbs up, and drop a comment below. I put a lot of work into bringing you real true crime cases from around the world. Only verified stories here. Your support helps this channel grow, and I truly appreciate every bit of interaction. After law enforcement completed the initial assessment of the scene, the bodies were transported for forensic examination. The autopsy results were released the next day. According to the official report, 48-year-old Ryan Long died from multiple gunshot wounds to the upper torso. His death was classified as an act of aggression involving a firearm. His 2 sons, Parker, age 8, and Ryan Jr., age 6, died from single close-range gunshot wounds to the head, which investigators classified as intentional lethal acts. Emily Long, age 34, had 1 gunshot wound. The firearm found beside her matched the type and caliber used in all the shootings. Forensic experts concluded that she ended her life after committing the crimes. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office officially stated that, at this stage of the investigation, there were no signs of outside involvement. The working theory, that Emily Long took the lives of 3 members of her family and then engaged in fatal self-harm, was identified as the priority version and supported by the evidence collected so far. Investigators paid particular attention to the fact that her husband sustained multiple wounds, while each of the sons had only 1. I agree with the investigators' view that this difference may point to a distinct emotional perception of each victim. Based on the established facts and the conclusions of the forensic exam, investigators determined that the crime was intentional, planned, and carried out by 1 person. There were no grounds to reconsider the working version at this time. The official information released after the autopsies and identifications helped reconstruct the family's life leading up to the tragedy. Ryan Long was born in 1975. He was 48 at the time of his death. In recent years, he worked as a school psychologist at Oyster River Middle School in Strafford County. Colleagues described him as reserved, attentive, and dedicated to supporting students, regularly participating in school counseling programs. Emily Long, age 34, worked in the local Wingett's restaurant chain. She did not hold a permanent administrative position, but was listed as an active employee. Representatives of the company confirmed that Emily was part of the staff and described her as polite and punctual. She was married to Ryan at the time of the tragedy, and the family lived together in their home in Madbury. The family had 3 sons: Parker, age 8, 6-year-old Ryan Jr., and the youngest, whose age was not officially published, but, according to information from the press briefings, was around 3. The boys were raised in a 2-tier routine. The older ones attended school, while the youngest stayed home under Emily's care. Judging by social media posts that remained publicly accessible or were saved by users before removal, Emily kept an active family chronicle, sharing photos of the boys, documenting day-to-day life, outings, and celebrations. The Long family was not registered as needing assistance. Thanks to the couple's combined income, they maintained a lifestyle consistent with the local middle-class standard. In Madbury, they were never on the radar of social services. Ryan, as an employee of the education system, had steady work and health insurance. Emily, despite working part-time, maintained a busy home life and often shared her experiences of raising her sons and managing everyday challenges online. Ryan's colleagues described him as responsible and level-headed. Within the school community, he was not known for conflicts and did not show signs of professional or emotional exhaustion. His involvement in youth support programs he supervised at the school received positive feedback from both parents and administration. When it came to Emily, people in the restaurant chain described her as friendly but prone to emotional ups and downs. According to co-workers, she had become more withdrawn in recent months and participated less in group activities. Some mentioned that Emily avoided conversations about her personal life, choosing instead to focus strictly on her work. At the same time, in one of her TikTok posts, Emily herself pointed out signs of emotional exhaustion and admitted she was struggling with a depressive state. I think it's important to highlight how sharply the family's outwardly stable social profile contrasted with the events that followed. This wasn't the first time real circumstances were completely hidden from outside observers. That's the conclusion that comes naturally after reviewing all available facts. Official information, along with open-source data, confirmed that the Long family was never considered troubled. Yet, neither steady income, nor community engagement, nor strong professional reputations offered any protection from the internal crisis that ultimately led to tragic consequences. According to official sources, confirmed by multiple independent publications, Ryan Long was diagnosed with glioblastoma in 2023. It's an aggressive and fast-moving malignant brain tumor known for an extremely poor prognosis. The condition progresses rapidly, and typical life expectancy after diagnosis rarely exceeds 12 to 15 months, even with active treatment. At the time he was diagnosed, Ryan continued working at the school, and according to colleagues, he tried for as long as possible not to discuss his condition. Outwardly, he maintained his professionalism, but over time, signs of declining health became noticeable. Reports mentioned increased fatigue, occasional headaches, and difficulty concentrating. The family learned about the illness when it was already progressing. In response, Emily began posting videos on TikTok where she shared her emotional struggles. Her content mostly focused on the emotional weight of her husband's illness, fear of loss, anxiety about the future, and the uncertainty that came with it. Because of the nature of the disease and how quickly it advanced, Ryan became limited in his daily activities. Although he remained present in family life, his participation gradually decreased. Meanwhile, Emily, judging by her posts, took on most of the household and emotional responsibilities. She openly talked about her worsening psychological state, acknowledging depression and social withdrawal. In my view, the decline in one family member's health can set off a ripple effect that impacts the entire household, especially when external emotional support is limited or non-existent. This point was repeatedly discussed in the comments under her posts. It's also important to note that Ryan himself never made any public statements about his condition. His diagnosis circulated through what Emily shared and through comments from family friends, acquaintances, and co-workers at the school. However, according to the Attorney General's office, no medical documentation was ever submitted to investigators, which means the illness appears in the case materials only as information reported by witnesses, not as a medically verified diagnosis supported by official records. The fact that the topic of his illness appeared so prominently online, even though portions of it were later removed, played a major role in shaping public perception. It was through TikTok that a wide audience first learned about the crisis unfolding inside the Long household, and this later became part of conversations about possible motives behind the tragedy. After her husband received the diagnosis, Emily Long began posting videos regularly on her TikTok page. The account quickly gained attention because her posts touched on raw, deeply personal topics: fear of loss, emotional exhaustion, and feeling powerless about the future. These clips essentially became an online journal where Emily shared her thoughts and feelings in real time. Most of the videos revolved around one central idea: living alongside a spouse whose life was slowly fading. Emily openly admitted that each day felt like emotional torment. She spoke of her attachment to Ryan, describing him as her perfect opposite, emphasizing his level-headedness and strong moral principles. By contrast, she portrayed herself as impulsive, anxious, and unable to handle being alone. One of the videos posted shortly before the tragedy contained her reflections on the fear of losing her husband and her struggle to imagine a future without him. Emily admitted she didn't know how she would raise her sons on her own, and said even the thought of the future frightened her. At the same time, she said almost nothing about how these experiences might affect Parker, Ryan Jr., or the youngest boy. This sparked criticism from viewers. In the comments, people pointed out the self-centered tone and the lack of empathy directed toward her sons. It seemed necessary to take these details seriously. When someone focuses entirely on their own fear of loss while ignoring those who depend on them, it can signal a distorted perception of the situation. This was a recurring conclusion among commenters, and it was hard to dismiss. Some videos drew mixed reactions. Subscribers wrote that Emily appeared detached, emotionally drained, even vacant on camera. There were suggestions that her posts weren't spontaneous, but carefully planned, maybe even rehearsed in advance. After the tragedy, Emily Long's TikTok account became inaccessible. It remains unclear whether the account was removed by TikTok, taken down by the family, or hidden as part of the investigation. But by that time, many of the videos had already been downloaded and reposted by others. This happened especially actively during discussions on TikTok and Reddit. Reposts circulated alongside criticism, psychological breakdowns of her behavior, and theories about Emily's motives. Several of Emily's most talked about videos went viral. They clearly showed emotional strain, but no signs of aggression. This only deepened the confusion. How could a woman who spoke so openly about her love for her family go on to take such extreme actions? It's worth pointing out that law enforcement didn't issue any official statements about the content of those videos. Still, it's clear that these recordings shaped public perception of the case and influenced the course of online discussion. Social media users developed their own theories, many of which were based heavily on these digital diaries. Emily Long's TikTok account ended up playing a dual role. On one hand, it gave her a platform to share her inner struggles and search for emotional support. On the other, it became a key element in how the public assessed her mental and emotional state in the final weeks before the tragedy. In the months leading up to the incident, things in the Long household shifted noticeably. Emily began avoiding social interaction. Invitations went unanswered, meetups were canceled, and her once regular circle of friends dwindled. This social withdrawal was mirrored in her video posts, where she openly discussed feeling overwhelmed and losing control of the situation. In one of her final posts, Emily spoke directly about her youngest son, the 3-year-old. She mentioned that he had been waking up more often at night, showing signs of anxiety that were affecting his sleep and behavior. Despite these red flags, her posts included only vague references to professional help, with phrases like, "He's too little for therapy," even though the symptoms were already becoming apparent. She also admitted she wasn't able to handle things on her own. Shortly before the tragedy, Emily posted a video saying she was planning to make major changes in her life. She promised to re-engage with the world, to get out of the house more, reconnect with friends, and provide a more normal social environment for her sons. On screen, she appeared composed, wore makeup, and seemed ready to move forward. But no follow-up posts ever came. The plan remained just that, a promise never fulfilled. Which raises a reasonable question. Was this sudden burst of positivity a genuine step toward healing, or just an attempt to maintain a facade of normalcy? When you follow the chain of events, you begin to see a larger pattern, a person in a deep crisis whose public attempts to shift direction may have been more performative than actual. So, the immediate backdrop to the tragedy appears to have been shaped by several compounding factors. Emily's increasing social isolation, visible signs of emotional burnout, growing concerns about her youngest son's condition, and promises of behavioral change that never materialized. Taken together, these details suggest that what happened wasn't sudden or inexplicable. Rather, it was part of an escalating tension that had moved well beyond the challenges of everyday life. A few hours after the tragedy, a striking message appeared on Emily Long's social media page. It read, "Remember us this way. 19 years. From the first to the last kiss. Today is the finale. The score is 0-0, but we were happy. Hold on to love." Attached to the post were family photos, a portrait of Emily and Ryan, holiday snapshots, and images with their sons. The post was set to a piece of music that added a sense of finality and closure. Shortly after, Emily Long's account was either deactivated or made private, making the original post unavailable. Still, screenshots and re-uploads had already started to circulate widely. Based on those, many online commentators and analysts concluded the message had likely been scheduled in advance. The post became, in essence, a digital record of a final act, a version of events laid out without offering a reason or asking for help. There were no explanations, just a plea to be remembered. Because of that, many experts viewed the post as a sign of premeditation, almost like the closing scene of a role that had been publicly performed. A key element in the post, the 0-0 score, was interpreted symbolically, a representation of both joy and sorrow, a tie between victory and loss. Online analysts believed it implied closure, a draw without winners or losers, and possibly a sense of injustice. Combined with the phrase, "Today is the finale," it gave the impression that a decision had already been made, and that the end had long been anticipated. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office, however, urged the public in an official release not to jump to conclusions, emphasizing that any potential motive might be complex. Still, the post became part of the investigation. It's being treated as a piece of the digital trail left by the family. And yet, the presence of photos, music, and such emotionally loaded language makes it hard not to view the post as the final piece in a series of events. Videos, confessions, promises of change, and then a message marking the end. In my view, this scheduled post wasn't just a farewell note. It was a signal of a life that was winding down according to a script, one that had possibly been written and uploaded long before it played out. Following the tragedy that shook the small town of Madbury, attention turned to one person, the only individual who couldn't explain what happened, yet may have been the sole witness during the most critical moment. The youngest in the Long family, their 3-year-old son, was found in the house that evening, hours after the estimated time of the incident. Physically, he was unharmed, but the fact that he remained in the home near the bodies of his family members, without outside contact for an extended period, raises serious concerns about the emotional toll. This boy might be the only one with any connection to the moment of the tragedy, even if that memory is subconscious, one investigator noted in a confidential report. After he was removed from the house, he was immediately placed under temporary care with close relatives. Who exactly became the guardian has not been disclosed in public sources. A medical exam showed no physical injuries, but within just a few days, specialists in trauma care for minors were brought in. A dedicated team of psychologists from the state's Child Protection Services took over, focusing on stabilizing his condition, preventing post-traumatic reactions, and creating a safe environment around him. As of the latest press reports, the boy's name has not been released. Confidentiality measures are being strictly upheld. He has not returned to his former routine and, from what is known, is not living in the home where everything happened. Questions about his long-term care are being handled privately by guardianship officials, attorneys, and mental health professionals. The future of the Long's 3-year-old son remains one of the very few aspects of this case where a positive outcome is still possible. But even in the best scenario, the impact of what he experienced will likely stay with him for life. The discovery of the bodies prompted the New Hampshire Attorney General's office to formally open a criminal case. As part of the investigation, a full review was conducted. Emergency service actions were examined, calls and messages were analyzed, and digital materials from inside the Long home were evaluated. Particular attention was paid to how quickly the circumstances of the crime were documented and how efficiently the responding agencies acted. However, because the presumed suspect passed away as a result of fatal self-harm, a court proceeding became impossible. Under state law, a criminal case must be closed when the person believed to be responsible is deceased. As a result, the investigation was completed, and no charges were filed. I don't believe the conclusions are obvious. If anything, the opposite is true. There are more questions left than answers.